Hello and welcome. This is going to be a weekly series where I put forward theories about build optimization, DMing techniques, and various other things related to Dungeons & Dragons. This isn't going to be a very beginner-friendly series, however. I'll try to explain a few things as I go on, but if the alphabet soup becomes too much for you to handle, check the description below. I'll keep a guide handy with links and references to what I'm talking about there. Moving on to the theory crafting for this episode, I'd like to talk about Gestalt Characters. This was a variant character creation concept that I first discovered while playing D&D 3.5, and naturally it translated quite well into the Pathfinder RPG. While DMing one of my most recent 5th Edition campaigns, I rediscovered the Gestalt rules and found that someone had translated them over to 5th Edition and made some effort to rebalance them a little bit. Some of the most dangerously overpowered things from previous incarnations of Gestalt characters have been addressed, while there are a few other items that have slipped through the cracks and break the game again. To begin, I'm first going to address the argument that comes up time and time again in defense of Gestalt characters: action economy. A Gestalt character is still just a single character with one move, one action, and one possible bonus action, whereas the two characters it's replacing each have their own actions, move actions, and bonus actions each. In theory, this means that a Gestalt character would be able to outperform either normal character individually in combat, but not both of them combined. The math of this defense actually does hold up just a little bit. But right now, let's take a look at the combined damage output of a Barbarian and a Fighter versus a Gestalt Barbarian Fighter. For the math, I'm going to assume that all characters involved are level 20, have whatever strength maximum is appropriate for their class, are using a great sword, have rage engaged if they're a Barbarian, and if possible, they have the Great Weapon Fighting class ability. A normal Barbarian would have 2 attacks that each deal 2d6 plus 11 damage, resulting in an average damage output of 36 points. A normal fighter would have 4 attacks that each deal 2d6 plus 5, but they also get to re-roll any 1s or 2s that pop up, resulting in an average damage output of 53.2. A Gestalt character would get the best of both of these, the ability to re-roll 1s and 2s, plus a Barbarian's strength and rage, resulting in 4 attacks that all deal 2d6 plus 11 damage, for an average output of 77.2 points. This is only slightly less than the combined output of 2 normal characters, that being 89.2, and while it's not by much, the math still technically checks out. However, I think it's worth noting that just because the expected damage of one character is 12 points less than the output of 2 doesn't mean it's balanced in any sense of the word. You also have to keep in mind that the 2 combined characters had 2 extra attacks with which to catch up. The area where the action economy argument becomes significant is in regard to spellcasters. A Gestalt spellcaster can only concentrate on one spell at a time, cast 1 spell per turn, or in some cases, cast 1 spell and 1 cantrip per turn, and will never have the same HP as 2 combined characters, which is a big limiting factor for wizards. However, this leads me to 2 other points that do legitimately break the game. Spellcasters at high levels run out of steam pretty quickly in 5th edition since they only have 1 or 2 slots for their most powerful spells. Gaining spell slots from both classes means they can quite literally last twice as long, and more importantly, cast 2 exceedingly powerful spells like Meteor Swarm instead of 1. But all of this pales in comparison to the hidden beast that lurks within the rules of 5th edition and wasn't really thought about when somebody wrote these Gestalt rules. Ability score improvements are considered class features now instead of character level features. That means that any class paired Gestalt with a fighter will have more ASIs and feats than they know what to do with. This leads the Barbarian Fighter character from earlier to have an armor class of 22 while completely naked and still have access to several amazing feats like Lucky, Great Weapon Master, or Tough to get rid of the fighter's D10 hit die. The one simple fact that ASIs are class features now gives any class combination the ability to max out their relevant stats incredibly quickly and still have room for feats that complement the build, or at some point feats that just look like they're fun to play around with. I also feel that it's worth mentioning there are other ways a Gestalt fighter or Barbarian mix could break 5th edition wide open. A Champion fighter has the ability to make critical hits much more consistently, while a Barbarian has access to the Brutal critical ability. The 2 of these combined is a significant boost to the damage output of the character. When I first read the rules for Brutal Critical, I thought that a Barbarian Rogue or a Barbarian Paladin would also be exceedingly broken. However, after seeing that Brutal Critical specifically only affects weapon damage dice, it's not as broken as you might initially think. A Barbarian Rogue can't actually crit somebody for 50 dice worth of sneak attack damage, nor can a Barbarian Paladin crit somebody for 30 dice worth of Divine Smite damage, because neither of those things are actually weapon damage. They're based off weapon damage, but they're not actually weapon damage. All the talking that I've done in this video brings me to one final conclusion. Gestalt characters are still incredibly overpowered. There may be some situations you might want to have that in your campaign, and a good DM can always make things challenging for a player. You can allow them in your games if you want to, but as it stands, you should take a look at how ability score improvements and caster spell slots are handled, because at the moment they're not balanced in any sense of the word. With that, I'm going to see you next week.